Last winter, more than 4 million American households called an HVAC technician for a furnace that was less than 8 years old. Not a vintage unit, not something inherited from a previous owner. A furnace they bought, new, and financed, and installed, and were told would keep their family warm for decades. And instead, it failed. Mid-January, in the cold, with a repair bill that started at $400 and climbed from there. You're not unlucky. You're not cursed. You bought exactly what the industry designed you to buy. There was a time, not ancient history, just 30 or 40 years ago, when a furnace was considered a once-in-a-lifetime purchase. The units coming out of American factories in the 1970s and 1980s were overbuilt by today's standards. Cast iron heat exchangers, thick-gauge steel cabinets, simple mechanical controls with almost nothing to fail electronically. A Bryant or a Carrier from 1978 would run, and run, and run. Technicians who've been in the trade for 30 years will tell you the same thing. The old ones didn't die, they were replaced. Homeowners would swap out a perfectly functional unit just to get higher efficiency ratings. The hardware itself, still working, still heating, still doing exactly what it promised. Something changed in the late 1990s, and it wasn't the technology, it was the ownership. Major HVAC manufacturers began consolidating. Independent brands got absorbed into large conglomerates. And when that happened, the engineering philosophy shifted away from build it to last, and toward build it to the margin. Quarterly earnings started driving product decisions. Warranty costs became line items to minimize, and the metric that mattered most stopped being, how long will this run? And became, how cheaply can we produce it without triggering returns in the first year? That 1-year buffer, that's your anti-reprotection. After that, you're on your own. Let's start with the part they named in the title, because it's the most expensive lie in your mechanical room. The heat exchanger is the metal chamber that separates combustion gases, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, from the air your family breathes. It is, without question, the most critical safety component in your entire heating system. In furnaces manufactured before the mid-1990s, heat exchangers were formed from heavy-gauge aluminized steel, sometimes up to 20-gauge thickness. Robust, weld-constructed, designed to flex through thousands of heating cycles without cracking. Today's residential heat exchangers? Many are stamped from steel so thin, 25 to 28 gauge, that field technicians describe them as feeling closer to ductwork than to the component protecting your indoor air quality. They crack. They develop microfractures around year 6 or 7, right when your warranty has expired. And when that happens, a repair technician has one answer: full heat exchanger replacement, minimum $100, sometimes $1,800, on a unit you paid $3,200 to install 6 years ago. And here's what they don't tell you at the point of sale. Many insurance carriers and HVAC companies will recommend full unit replacement at that point rather than repair, because the repair costs nearly as much as a new install. Mission accomplished. But the heat exchanger isn't even your first problem. It's your most expensive one. Your first problem is the control board. In furnaces built through the 1980s, the control system was electromechanical. Relays, switches, components any electrician could source at a supply house for under $30 and replace in an afternoon. Modern furnaces run on proprietary printed circuit boards, microprocessor-controlled, firmware-dependent, and manufactured exclusively for each model. When that board fails, and industry service data suggests many fail between years 4 and 9, you are not buying a generic replacement part. You are buying a manufacturer-specific component, often available only through authorized distributors, priced between $280 and $620, depending on the brand. And if your model has been discontinued, which happens faster than you'd expect in today's product cycles, that part may simply not exist anymore. The furnace is 8 years old. It's irreparable. Not because the hardware failed catastrophically, but because a $400 circuit board is no longer manufactured. That is not an accident. That is a product architecture decision. Here's a component most homeowners have never heard of, and manufacturers are counting on that. The draft inducer motor, sometimes called the combustion blower, is the small motor that vents exhaust gases out of the heat exchanger before and during each burn cycle. It works in tandem with a pressure switch, a small diaphragm device that confirms proper venting before allowing ignition. In furnaces from earlier generations, inducer motors were built from commercial-grade component. Yes, with bearing assemblies rated for decades of operation. Today's residential inducers use lighter motors with sleeve bearings instead of sealed ball bearings, a manufacturing cost reduction of roughly $18 per unit. Your cost when it fails around year 7 or 8, between $350 and $550 in parts and labor. The pressure switch connected to it, a component that costs manufacturers under $4 to produce, retails as a replacement part for $55 to $90. Every single component in the failure chain has been optimized, not for your longevity, but for their margin. None of this happened by accident. The residential HVAC industry discovered something valuable in the early 2000s. The replacement cycle is where the real money lives. A furnace sale generates revenue once, but a furnace that fails every 10 to 12 years, instead of every 25 to 30, generates that revenue 3 times over a homeowner's typical occupancy. Add in service contracts, repair calls, and the technician referral ecosystem built around new unit sales, and the math becomes very clear. The industry didn't just stop building durable products. It built a financial model that depends on them not being durable. Efficiency ratings became the marketing story because a 96% AFUE rating sounds like progress, but efficiency and durability are not the same thing. You can build a highly efficient furnace that lasts 8 years. They proved it. Here's the part that should make your blood pressure spike. The efficiency improvements that justified higher price points. The modulating gas valves, the variable speed blower motors, the communicating thermostats. All of those features added electronic complexity. And electronic complexity in a high heat, high vibration, high humidity environment means more failure points. The simpler the furnace, historically, the longer it lasted. So in the process of adding features that consumers could be marketed to, features that drove higher retail prices, manufacturers simultaneously increased the probability of failure. You paid more for something more likely to break. That is the product design reality that never makes it into a brochure. And it's not just your furnace. The same consolidation pattern, the same value engineering philosophy, the same replacement cycle business model. It runs through water heaters, central air systems, and heat pumps. The mechanical room in your home has become a subscription service you never agreed to. Every 10 years, on average, you are effectively repurchasing your entire HVAC system. For most homeowners, that's $8,000 to $14,000 every single decade for equipment that used to be a 30-year investment. So what can you actually do with this information? First, when shopping for a replacement unit, ask specifically about heat exchanger gauge and warranty. Any manufacturer unwilling to warrant the heat exchanger for at least 20 years is telling you something. Second, look at commercial-grade residential options. Brands producing equipment for light commercial use build to higher standards, and many offer residential installations. Third, before you buy, search for the replacement parts availability on your model. If proprietary circuit boards are already backordered or discontinued on similar units, walk away. You are not powerless here. You are informed. And informed consumers who know where the money is being extracted from them, make different decisions. They buy differently. They demand differently. And eventually, the market has to answer. If this changed how you see what's sitting in your basement right now, subscribe. Because next week, we're pulling apart the water heater industry. And what we found is somehow worse.